and welcome to another episode of the We Have a Meeting podcast. So today we are disrupting the business world. We have a real life comedian on the podcast. He's the voice behind the laughs on Sirius XM Radio's Laugh USA, Blue Collar Comedy, and Jamie Foxx's Foxhole stations. Hailing from New York, he's the stand-up who's conquered stages from the USA to Europe, Australia, and even the Caribbean. He's here today to talk about the merge between the corporate world and the comedy circuit. His book, which was released last year, The ROI of LOL. Our guest today is stand-up comedian Clayton Fletcher. Clayton, how are you?
Wow, what a nice introduction. Thank you. I'm very well. How are you, Jack?
I'm very well. Thank you for joining us. I've been working all morning trying to find out lovely things about you. So I hope I've got enough lovely things in there, Clayton. We start the podcast the same way every time. So I'll hit you with the big question. Who are you and what problem do you solve?
Okay, so as you mentioned, Jack, I'm a professional stand-up comedian. I live in New York City, but I travel all over the world performing. I'm also the chief comedy officer at a PR firm here in New York City called Peppercom. And in my role as chief comedy officer, I help the business people that I interact with, whether at the company or with their clients or prospects. I help them learn what comedians know that all business people should learn. And so that's my role. And it includes stand-up comedy, improvisational comedy, and even sketch comedy. All three major comedy disciplines have clear applications to business.
Good. Very good answer. And we're going to delve deeper into some of the things that you've just mentioned there. I guess going back a little bit, what attributes did you have when you were younger that have set you up to be the man you are today, the stand-up comedian?
Okay, so that's a great question. I have a comedy special out called Middle Child Syndrome, which basically tells you anything you need to know about what made me the man I am today. I'm one of three boys. And I was mostly ignored as a child, as middle children tend to be. So I needed to find my voice and get attention, which is why I'm on stage every night, even to this day. So what I learned is that the power of laughter is it grabs people's attention, and it makes you, if you might otherwise be Mr. Cellophane, you actually can help stand out in the crowd by just being funny and being known for being someone that can make other people laugh.
So I'm going to have to ask you to explain a bit more for me. Chief Comedy Officer, that's not a job role that you see every day. So what can you tell us about it? What is it? How do I sell my business and become one?
Yeah, so the co-author of my book, Steve Cody, who's also the CEO of Peppercom, he loves to joke that I am one of two chief comedy officers in the whole world, and the other one works at a nuclear power plant in Estonia. So I'm America's foremost chief comedy officer. What it entails mostly is training the employees at Peppercom in the different comedy disciplines and helping them apply those skills to their work. Whether it's giving a presentation and then you're going to be more likable, charming, more charismatic and funny, or working together, collaborating like we do in improvisational comedy, or I'll teach them how to use sketch comedy to drive their messaging home, whether it's through commercials or corporate videos that we have to make, holiday videos, things of that nature, and that's where we use that. So it's really about kind of infusing comedy into all of our work. And as a result, some of our clients and even some non-clients have reached out to us and said, hey, we want to learn more about this. And then I've ended up going to other companies, some of them in the Fortune 500, and teaching business people how to apply comedy skills in their business life. And so that's why we wrote the book, because we realized that we wanted more people to learn about what we're doing because it's incredibly effective.
Does that mean that, it's probably quite a philosophical question, but does that mean that your comedy style translates well to the corporate world, or is there a style of comedy that you tend to find universally fits, i.e. like you couldn't go for surreal comic in the corporate world?
Right. Yeah. Obviously, the audience needs to get the joke. And one of the very first rules you learn when you become a comedian is know your audience. So you can't just do the same thing no matter what performance you're doing. So you kind of have to know the sensibilities and the sense of humor of of your audience. So if I'm speaking in front of let's say a group of financial accountants or something like that, they're going to probably enjoy humor that is based more in logic and reasoning, maybe some wordplay, things like that. And if I'm standing in front of a bunch of creatives, like an advertising agency or, maybe PR or something like that, then in that case, we can do a little bit more absurdism and a little bit more broad comedy. So you kind of have to know, just like a comedian, the first question I ask when I walk into the club is, how's the crowd? And what that really means is, what kind of stuff are they into? Right? Do they want me to be a little bit edgier? Do they want me to, are they really smart so we can do kind of the brainier jokes? Are they really dumb so we have to kind of tone it down for them a little bit? And so the same thing happens when we do this type of training at a company. We have to kind of figure out what's going on, who's here, and what's most likely to land for them. So that's the job.
You mentioned a key thing before around reading the room. So obviously, as a comedian, you're going to be a specialist at that. You can walk into the club and know exactly how on you've got to be, likelihood of bombing, likelihood of having to adjust certain jokes in the set. And I think that's a key skill that often business people wish they had, especially maybe coming out of the pandemic, starting to have more face-to-face meetings. So what skills have you found, or what tricks are universal and crossover in terms of walking into a boardroom and knowing this is how I need to be reading the room?
Yeah, so right away, when you walk into any meeting, any pitch presentation, even a job interview, in my opinion, you should start off with a little bit of lighthearted, ice-breaking type of humor. And so what tends to work is something about the space that you're in. For example, if once you get to the reception, then they say, well, they'll meet you back here, and someone comes to sort of escort you to where that room is. Maybe it's a really long hallway and we can make a joke. Well, I guess you get your steps in every day, right? Walking this hallway every day. It's quite a narrow and long hallway. So kind of just playing it safe, not really making jokes about religion or politics or anything that goes on in the bedroom or the bathroom, but just kind of having some fun with, what's going on in the room, commenting on your surroundings. And then this again comes directly from stand-up comedians. Almost anywhere I perform, I will comment on the space. Not long ago, I was at this place called Bananas Comedy Club, and the stage was decorated with like palm trees with bananas hanging off of them. And so I had some fun with the decor, if you will, of the comedy club. Now, it's much easier to make fun of bananas in a palm tree than it might be of a typical office setting. But I find there's always something, like maybe the employees all have little trinkets on their desk, and you can joke about that on your way to the meeting. Or, just maybe how many windows there are, or how cold it is in there, anything like that, just to kind of break the ice and show a little bit of your personality before we start talking about, percentages and ROI and earnings per share and things of that nature. It's helpful to just remind everyone, including the person who's going to make whatever the big decision happens to be, I'm a human being first. And that's really what comedy does for us. It humanizes us in a way that other types of bonding can't. The example I always use, if you picture a typical office water cooler, most people talk either about the weather or what the local sports team did last night. And those are the topics that are safest, right? Oh, did you see the Yankees won? Or, hey, do you think it's going to rain this weekend? And that doesn't really get us anywhere. But really sharing a laugh together has a powerful bonding effect that we actually call love potion, because in a very real way, in your brain, the same chemicals are released through laughter as through love, as through, extreme sports or strenuous exercise. The things that cause us to feel good they all have this same sort of combination of chemicals. Of course, I'm talking about peptides and, endorphins, things of that nature. These things are released through these different methods, but one of the most powerful and easiest ways to get them is through laughing. And so when you can laugh and make somebody else laugh, it kind of makes them fall in love with you a little bit, which is why we call it the love potion, or the secret weapon of why we use these skills in the first place.
Well, it makes so much sense when you say it, because obviously you're still dealing with people, even if you are off the stage.
Of
Um,
course.
so, something that I'm curious about, what are the common misconceptions and challenges, given that your role is such a niche one, in terms of when you walk into a room? Is it a case of everyone's kind of got the guard up a little bit and they kind of don't know what to expect? What is that typical misconception dynamic like?
Right. So say someone hires me to speak at uh, let's say a pharmaceutical company, right? And so I walk in and there's 50 people that normally work with medicine and sales and things of that nature, hospitals and all that. And now here comes this comedian that somebody thought it was a good idea to bring in and teach us all how to be funny today. Uh, the tension in the room, it's palpable. You can feel that everyone's nervous. I hope he doesn't expect me to be some kind of jokester today. Uh, but what people quickly learn is what we're really talking about is what comedians do today. Modern comedy isn't really about joking or doing something that's completely outside of your comfort zone. It's really more about honesty. When I go on stage tonight here in New York, I'm going to tell the audience the truth about what's going on with me and my life. And that's really where the best comedy comes from. The truth, as it turns out, is funnier than anything we can make up anyway. So we always start with that. And once people see a few examples where I'll take some from my own life, maybe play a video of some other comedians, doing the type of comedy that we think is appropriate for this particular company. And every corporate culture is different, by the way. So we kind of have to feel it out and figure out exactly, how loose or uptight they might be. What works for one company may not work for another. So everything sort of has to be personalized in that way. But once we start to show them a few examples, what will happen is they'll become a little bit less afraid of it. And then we have to get somebody who's really high up on the corporate food chain to give it a try first. Maybe a senior vice president or even the CEO come up and say, you know what, I'm going to go for it. And then that person performs for a minute or two and makes everybody laugh. And that kind of puts us all at ease, because it's like, okay, well, this isn't really about trying to discover America's next top comedian, right? There's no executive from Netflix here to try to find a comedy superstar. It's really more about learning certain skills that we think apply directly from the comedy world to the business world. One of them we already mentioned, reading the room. Another one is, kind of changing course when things are maybe not going well. Being able to deal with objections or rejection from the audience, improvising and thinking on your feet, kind of, those things that comedians consider second nature, but maybe business people have never even tried before. But even if they just get their feet wet a little bit, they might get a little bit better at what they have to do at work every day.
And how many is there a bit of like a, when you're at school and there's the new tough guy in school and everyone's like, I'm going to show him that I'm tougher. Is there ever a dynamic where you come in, Clayton's the funny guy, but everyone thinks they've got to be America's next top comedian and show you that they're funnier?
Yeah, and a lot of times that doesn't work. Every company, they always tell us when we first have our maybe I'll talk with a couple of the people who maybe read my book, The ROI of LOL, or they heard about the work that I do with companies, and they'll ask me to come and speak for their firm, their company, their organization. And they always tell me on that initial call, oh, well, we have one guy in this office and he is always making everyone laugh. And his name is Lou, and you're going to love Lou. I'm sure he'll do this. Invariably, I should say almost invariably, Lou ends up not being the star of the day. It turns out the people who are the loudest and most boisterous and maybe the ones who try to get everyone's attention all the time kind of end up often being not so great at this. And sometimes you'll find someone that you maybe ever spoke 2 words to in the 5 years that you've known her. She'll get up and just absolutely kill it. And I found this is true in the real comedy world as well, in the professional comedy world. Many of my colleagues that have tremendous success on stage are actually quite shy and maybe even awkward and introverted off stage. So it becomes an interesting experiment. You can go ahead and try to predict who's going to be great at this, and I'll bet against you every time.
Wow, so interesting. So a lot of our audience is salespeople, right? And when I first started off in sales, salespeople were kind of caricatures, of womanizing addiction and all sorts of craziness. And modern salespeople are a bit more Silicon Roundabout, Silicon Valley kind of feeling to them, where a bit more technical, maybe not quite as exciting as they once were, and probably in need of a bit of a comedy injection. So, if you were to give salespeople advice where comedy can be effective in a sales call, in an email, on a demo of a product, what are some go-tos for people who are looking to inject a little bit of personality?
Yeah, well, first off, Zach, the phenomenon that you're describing about how the role of salesperson and the personality type of the salesperson has, I would say, evolved over the years. Maybe in the old days, it's kind of like the hard drinking, out all night partying, and going hard all day kind of personality. Like I think of a movie like Boiler Room, where it's just or Glenn Gary, Glenn Ross, coffee is for closers. That sort of mentality has gone by the wayside as things have become more technical and more algorithm based, and these people are more data analysts than a cult of personality, if you will. So what I advise, and I do work with sales forces quite often, and what I have learned is that what they've forgotten about is that human connection. I don't care what kind of widget you're selling or what kind of service you provide. What really makes people want to work with you is who you are. And so, yeah, you don't have to be that super aggressive womanizer type that you described, Zach, but you do have to find out how to make a real connection with somebody. So it might just be, oh, I see that you're based in Richmond, Virginia. It's funny. Right after college, I lived in Richmond, Virginia for a little while. Have you ever been to this weird bar that I used to go to? And then maybe tell a funny story about a time that you were in Richmond, Virginia, and had a laughable experience there, right? This tends to be much more effective than kind of the old school advice of opening with a joke. And we see this a lot in presentations, sales presentations and whatnot. People think that you should start off with, before I get started, 3 guys walk into a bar, right? And so then they tell this awful joke that I probably could have read on the internet somewhere, and it doesn't really do the job. But if incorporating throughout your presentation in a natural way your sense of humor could help you make stronger connections with the person to whom you're trying to sell, I think that's a skill that everyone in the sales world would want to learn. And I know a lot of salespeople who think that they're, so charming and funny and charismatic, but sometimes when they try the stand-up, they realize how much they don't know about developing their personal charisma and what exactly that means.
And I think this will link in nicely, but before you started going on stage and being a comedian and putting yourself out there, you were obviously, I would assume, naturally a funny person, being the middle child, finding that voice and looking for that validation. What was the skill set that was missing between the funny guy and then the stand-up comedian? What was the bit that needed to be worked on to bridge that gap?
Yeah, so if you're a naturally funny person, you probably have a leg up on someone who might not know whether or not he or she is funny, right? So that's a good start. It's like a lot of the people who get into comedy, it's because one of their friends was like, oh, you're so funny, you should try stand-up. But there's a technique to it. There's a big difference, as you guys probably know, between being out at the pub with your friends and having a few drinks and making each other laugh all night, than going up there in front of a group of strangers with all the lights off, a spotlight on you and a microphone in your hand. It's not the same, but there is a technique. And in this book, the ROI of LOL, there it is, we explore what those techniques are. You can break down stand-up comedy into different styles, observational or anecdotal. There's also put-down humor and other types of comedy that we don't really do in the office too much. And then from there, you want to take it and sort of analyze how to present a good setup, right? So the setup is your subject, and how you feel about that subject, what you plan on speaking about, right? And then your punchlines are the parts that make the audience laugh. So what we really have learned to do, and this would help those that are more into sort of data analysis and have kind of that left brain mentality, we pick apart comedy and figure out why it's funny. And so you can sort of work backwards and reverse engineer how we got there, right? So I can watch a comedian and say, oh, I see why this is so funny, because I understand the different elements, the setup, the punchline, the callback, the act out. And in this book, we explore how comedians use these different elements or techniques and how you can apply them to your sales calls or to your pitches, whatever.
Does your teaching only exist in America? And the reason I ask that is obviously there's a cultural difference even between the UK and America in terms of what's deemed as funny. So is it a case of the things in that book are universal, or are they only suited to an American market?
Yeah, so the techniques in the book are universal, but comedy itself is not universal. And as you mentioned in the very warm intro, Jack, I have performed around the world. It's very different doing comedy in Sweden or Australia or England than it is in America. So you kind of have to know, like, if I get up there and start talking about the mayor of New York City and I'm in Latvia, right? They don't know that much about the mayor. So you kind of have to use common sense and see what is, going to land with the people that you're speaking to. But even in a more subtle way, sometimes there are different words. Like here we say a student that's in his 5th year of school, he's in 5th grade or a 5th grader. But if I want to talk a joke about a 5th grader, but I'm in Australia, I say year 5 because that's what they call it there. So you kind of learn to use the local colloquialisms and the subtle differences. But yeah, I mean, the first rule when you're not in your hometown is to make sure that your jokes travel well, because some of them will not. But yeah, in a broader sense, the techniques and the methods and the elements of comedy are the same in any language in any country around the world.
And have you got anything anecdotal in terms of you worked with someone, they were here before, as a result of working with you, there was this problem they were trying to overcome and now they're here, something in terms of a story of working with you and what they got out of it?
Yeah, for sure. I worked with an event planner, a CEO of an event planning firm in Ohio. And he described the issues he was having as a leader. Honestly, he just said, I'm CEO of this company. I'm good at this and that. But where I'm really failing, and I give him a lot of credit for being honest with himself, where I'm failing is connecting with my employees. I don't know if they like me. I don't feel like we're a family. I want my company to feel more like a family. And, how do I make that happen? And so what I recommended is that he try stand-up comedy to learn about his sense of humor and to get better at it. He actually would come from Ohio to work with me one-on-one, call it executive development. I think that's how I build him for it anyway. But what I was really teaching him is what I know about using stand-up on stage. And eventually he said, I think I'd like to try it. So I actually got him a spot at a real comedy club in New York on a show that I was performing in. And I said, I have a friend that I've been coaching and he's never done stand-up before. Can we give this guy just 3 minutes on stage tonight? And the manager said, you know what, Clayton, I don't know why, but I'm going to let this happen. It could be the worst 3 minutes that ever happened on that stage. Well, the guy got up there, and I'm not going to tell you that he brought the house down, but he did get laughs. And the key thing is we videotaped him. And then we reviewed that video later. And then he went back to Ohio and contacted a few of the comedy clubs there. And then he started performing in the comedy clubs in Ohio. And then he would rewrite the material with me, and we'd talk about why it worked, why it didn't. We'd watch the video, almost like a sports coach on the day after the game, where they review the game footage and say, okay, so here's what we did well, and here's what went wrong. Here in America, a football coach will draw X's and O's all over the screen, that sort of thing. Well, after about a year of working with me, he reported back that he was more comfortable now being funny at work and connecting with his employees through comedy and making jokes with them. This one had to miss work, so we were teasing her that she had an appointment to. I don't remember like all the exact details, but they sort of developed what we call inside jokes among them, where if somebody said a certain word, it would kind of just make everybody laugh because it would remind them of this other joke that had happened a while back. And it's a great way to build rapport. It's much stronger than the weather or sports to just be able to laugh together. And so, I'm not going to sit here and say he owes it all to me, but I will say that according to him, the work that we did together helped him humanize himself as a leader. And as a result, he found that his employees were quitting less often and that they seemed generally happier at work. And when they would leave better reviews of the company itself on Glassdoor and other websites where people kind of go back and say, what was it like working for this company? And so he saw his numbers going up there as well. And that's one of the things, guys. It's not so easy to measure, is this comedy training working? Is it really having an impact? But one thing you can look at is things like exit interviews and scores that people give once they're out and they don't have any reason to lie anymore. That's important. And also just your overall turnover rate, right? So at Peppercom itself, our turnover rate is less than 9% in an industry where the standard is around 30%. And we credit that a lot to the comedy-based culture that we've developed over the years.
That was amazing, by the way. So thank you for sharing that. Is that a common thing that you see then? The connection problem was interesting. I wasn't sure if that would be the thing that would come up. So is there sort of I'm a C-suite exec and I'm struggling to connect? Or is that quite a common problem, or was that unique to that individual?
Well, it's certainly not unique. I don't know if it's common, but what we do find in almost every company, there's some sort of silo system where these guys don't talk to those ladies and those ladies don't talk to those guys. And why does this happen, right? So it seems to be whether it's generational, like, the younger people don't trust the older people and vice versa. The people that have been with the company for 20 years don't like this new crop of fresh hires. Maybe there's been a merger, an acquisition, right? So now all of a sudden a company that used to be 50 people is now 300, and they're trying to figure out how they're all going to get along. And there's a bit of a power struggle whenever that sort of thing happens. And so it's really about building trust, right? And so we trust people more when we laugh with them. You just feel like you're more connected, and so therefore less likely to maybe stab each other in the back. Now, obviously, the two aren't truthfully related. Someone can make you laugh all day to your face and then stab you in the back. But it's more about the perception that you have as someone that's at least trying. There's a certain amount of risk that we take every time we make a joke. I'm hoping that you'll laugh at my joke. And if you don't laugh at my joke, I'm hoping you at least appreciate the fact that I was trying to get along with you, right? So sometimes even a failed joke can be a success in a way, because it's like, well, that Jack, he's not that funny, but hey, at least he tried. I like him because he tried to make me laugh, even though it didn't work, right? And so this sort of thing can be powerful as well. And a lot of this book is about failure, because comedy really only happens through trial and error. So we have to be free to fail, as we like to say. And so that's a big part of it as well.
Yeah, I think that's important. It's not a silver bullet. You're not saying if you work with me, everyone's going to be laughing and being with you forever.
Even I bomb, so I can't promise you won't bomb. I mean, I bomb all the time. So it's just part of the process of learning. To me, comedy is kind of like golf. You never truly master it. You can only just get better, but there's no finish line. Even if your handicap is -12 in golf, you still could be -13, -14, right? And comedy is the same. As funny as I am, I can always be funnier. And so that's what it's all about, is just an endless journey of trying to get better at this and build connections and learn how to develop my skills.
One thing that we've so as a business that me and Jack run, we have a team of salespeople who basically work for lots and lots of different clients as their salesperson for the day, right? So sometimes they're dealing with CEOs, sometimes marketing. But one thing we've always struggled to teach is this ability to improvise on the fly. So you might be pitching someone and they might throw the most bizarre curveball ever. Like we've called people up and they've said, is this about sex? How big's your dick? All sorts of crazy stuff from the other side of the phone, right? And some people can really think on the fly and kind of make that humorous and roll with the punches. And other people, if it doesn't fit a certain formula, suddenly are just like, oh, I don't know what to say now, and they're out the door. Have you spotted anything when you've been teaching people the improv skill that carries over as this is a way of getting better at that?
Yeah, well, that's a great question too, Zach. And before I answer, I just want to make the differentiation for anyone who might be listening and might not know the difference between stand-up and improv. So stand-up is just one person with one microphone, doing all the talking, and the audience is only supposed to say ha. But in improv, we work as a team. Whose line is it anyway? Or there's a show here in the States called Wild and Out, where there's no script, but you kind of tell a story as a team. And these skills are not, they're learned skills. No one is born with improv skills. Now, maybe some people have instincts that others don't have, but the actual skills of improv are acceptance, building, continuing, and finalizing, right? So we break these four elements of improv down, and the first two are just, you say yes. So if someone tries to move things in a direction that I'm not expecting, it might be my natural impulse to say, no, hold on. I was talking about this, right? But in improv, if you say, okay, Clayton, it sure is cold here on the moon, I would say, yes. So now I'm accepting your premise that we're on the moon. And now my next line is going to be something about the moon. And I wish we had more gravity. Or I wonder if there's a Starbucks up here. I could go for some coffee. Whatever I say is going to continue the thought that you started. And this is very hard to learn for many business leaders who have, I guess, a dictatorial kind of mentality, like what I say goes, because you have to give up that control. And a lot of us are control freaks, and it becomes a real challenge for many of us to be able to say, okay, well, that's not what I thought we were going to do, but let's give it some air. Let's give it some space and see if it grows into something. And sometimes the most off the wall idea can lead us to something that we can actually use, but only if we give it a chance by not shooting it down right away. By the way, you can also say yes, but, which is the same as no. And we hear that a lot. Yes, but it's not in the budget. Yes, but I don't think corporate will ever go for that. Yes, but I don't see how we can make it work. That's the same as saying no. So we really try to give each other's ideas, no matter how ridiculous, a little bit of space to breathe and see if it can turn into something that's actionable and usable for us. And so we have two different chapters in the book that are dedicated exclusively to improv. And in the first half of the book, we talk about how to use it in a performance setting. And in the second half of the book, we go back to improv and talk about how we use these same skills in business, whether it's for brainstorming or just kind of thinking on your feet and going with the flow. If the person on the other line says something you're not expecting, it could be a bit of a test, and maybe you should give it a chance instead of just shooting that person down. A lot of times, salespeople in particular, they kind of have a script that they like to stick to. These 5 bullet points. I want you to know this, this, and this about my company or my product, whatever the case may be. We have found that throwing that script away is often the road to closing the deal, because now we're not just reading from a script, but now we're actually having a human connection, and I've become someone that you want to work with. And that is hard to teach, but over time, you can learn how to go with the flow and kind of roll with the punches, if you will, almost like a boxer. You just don't know where that left hook is coming from. But yeah, if you get good at that, you can become a better conversationalist and sort of let the prospect lead the conversation in a different way. No one likes to be talked at. So let's hear what you have to say. And okay, I never thought of that, but let's explore it a bit. Let's go with it.
That's beautiful. There's definitely a few role plays for the team in handling some of that. I want to, obviously we could talk to you all day. You've got things to do. So I want to leave on a final question. Your book, let's imagine it's the prescription to a set of problems, what symptoms does someone need to have that might make it worthwhile reading your book?
Okay. So the first symptom, if you will, that I would want you to have in order to read my book is not an illness at all, but it's a curiosity. I would like all of our readers to have a curiosity about, is there something that a comedian would know that I could actually benefit from learning? And if your answer to that question is no, I'm not interested in comedy. We have a humorless workplace culture. We just, we do things by the book here. I don't have any interest in this. Then I would just encourage you, please don't buy my book. I don't want you reading it. You're just going to leave me a bad review on Amazon anyway. I'm not interested in that. So you need to have a curiosity about, what do comedians know that I should learn, So we've explored some of these areas already on this short and very fun, by the way, conversation. But yeah, it's how do I read a room? How do I develop my personal charisma? How do I become a better leader? How do I build a workplace culture that is healthy and is open and involves teamwork and trust? How do I close the sale? How do I get someone to say yes without me forcing her to do that, right? So this is what it's really about, is the things that comedians do every single day, every single night. There are certain elements of my job that translate directly to yours. And so the symptoms would be a curiosity for what those things are, and a willingness to think kind of outside your comfort zone and maybe try something new that you might actually benefit greatly from, as so many of my clients have over the years.
Beautiful. And then if people want to read the book or make one step more than that and maybe work with you or find out how to work with you, how do they start those processes?
Yeah, sure. So the book, we have a landing page, ROILOL.com. So just take out the V and of, ROILOL.com for the book. And you can reach me. I'm on all social media at Clayton Comic, whether it's Twitter or Instagram, or I'm also on LinkedIn, Clayton Fletcher. And I look forward to hopefully hearing from some of your listeners, and we can continue the conversation.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Clayton. Means a lot.
It's a pleasure. Thank you, guys.